Good morning, and thank you for joining us again on our call today. My name is Jeff Nizuka. I will be your host and presenter here. I'm the lead account executive here at AcreValue. And today we'll be covering how folks are using AcreValue for their own personal research or for their professional business as well. Now, specifically, we'll start by talking about just what is AcreValue, as well as the data sets and the information that you can find on AcreValue. Then we'll spend most of the conversation talking about how folks use AcreValue for their specific goals or research. And then we'll end the discussion with directions on how to get started. And like I mentioned before, we'll have a Q&A session towards the end as well. Stick around until the end, as we do have a free trial coupon for you, for our consumers who are on the webinar here, because you attended. So as a thank you, we'd like to extend that over to you. Again, stick around till the end. Now, let's go ahead and get started. And I see quite a few folks who are joining us. So again, thank you there. Given that we do have a lot of folks from a lot of different backgrounds, and many of you signed up at different points over the last few years, I think it's probably helpful to start the conversation here today by setting the tone of what is AcreValue, right? So AcreValue is the gold standard in land research software. And the way that AcreValue works is that it pulls together many different data sets so you can research land, contact landowners, and determine land values as fast as possible. Currently, we've got over 1 million users. That includes you, the folks who are with us today. So thanks for being thanks for being here, and thanks for being part of the AcreValue community. Generally, we see around 500,000 visitors on the website every month, a good portion of whom are not just using this for curiosity, but actually using AcreValue on the day-to-day for their businesses as well. And we can cover some of those use cases later. We do cover over 3,000 counties in the lower 48 states. So if you do have any questions specific to where you're located or potentially where you might be interested in, we do have a Q&A session later in the webinar. Let's talk about it. Now, I mentioned that AcreValue helps speeds up research by pulling together many different data sets. So let's talk about those. What is the data that's on AcreValue? Why is it helpful? And to summarize that information, let's talk about the data that is here. I would lay out the four main pillars of AcreValue something like this. So number one, you can see the landowner profile. So that includes the landowner's name and contact information, including potential phone numbers and email addresses. You can also see comparable sales, which are recent transactions of sold land. For a little bit of background here, in real estate, appraisers and realtors use like-kind properties to determine land values for their clients. So being able to see recent transactions will give you a solid estimate of current land values. AcreValue's comparable sales, those feed in weekly from county records. And a unique part of our comparable sales records is also being able to see whether there was a mortgage for the transaction or whether it was a cash purchase. That's going to be helpful to know when talking to the landowner. You can also see land characteristics. So that includes things like crop history, flood hazard, soil maps, and the brand new elevation and topography maps that were added to AcreValue earlier this week. We're very excited about those. You can also see local energy infrastructure as well, including nearby transmission lines, substations, wind turbines, solar farms, and more, as well as ownership information, status, and other relevant info for each. I've seen this become much more relevant conversation recently, as folks are becoming more aware of other opportunities for highest and best use case for their land. And one thing to note here, the government has now shut off new access to the substation dataset, which means that AcreValue is one of the only places to go find that information. So we just covered the four main pillars of data on AcreValue. Now let's talk about putting that information into action, into practice, right? What does that look like? And so for the folks who use AcreValue, for our consumer audience who might be using AcreValue for their own properties or maybe for curiosity, we've found that most folks are doing some of the following on AcreValue. And it starts with, for folks who are interested in purchasing new land, AcreValue will help by presenting you with a map of parcels and local landowners, as well as active for sale properties. You can then use AcreValue to research those land prices using the comparable sales that we just talked about. Or you can also use AcreValue to find a local real estate expert or financing solutions. And for folks who want to find new land to rent, the process is pretty similar as well. Search through a map of parcels and landowners, either local or potentially out-of-state landowners as well. Then use AcreValue to research land values, get in touch with the landowner to start a conversation and propose a rental. Now, in terms of managing your property, we also see current landowners visit AcreValue frequently to manage their own properties. Primarily, this involves staying up to date with local land values and how those might impact your decision to sell or hold. Landowners also visit AcreValue quite a bit to connect with other landowners. Potentially, you might have your neighbors nearby or potential renters, as well as finding and printing property maps for their properties. On the topic of staying in touch with neighbors, on the topic of staying in touch with local land values, I will say AcreValue also puts out periodic reports on what's happening in terms of regional and state level land markets. So definitely check those out on the website when you get a chance. And finally, for folks who are looking to potentially sell a property, AcreValue is a great way to quickly estimate the land values and then prepare all of the research needed to list a property. And if you're in the market to buy or sell, I will note we have a nationwide network of real estate agents and local experts who are in our network. So reach out to us and we'd be happy to connect you with one of them as well. Now, we just covered the main ways that our consumer audience is using AcreValue. Now, what about our professional users, right? We're grateful that AcreValue is the main avenue for folks in the industry to quickly find data and finish their research. And because of that, we've been able to have conversations with folks from many different professional industries around land. That includes real estate, that includes finance, investment, energy, and more. And for all of these folks, a common thread is that AcreValue is providing them with consistent and reliable access to better data and the tools needed to shorten that research cycle and put reports in front of clients or customers quicker and more professionally. Given these different use cases that I've just covered, now let's jump into the AcreValue software and we'll start by taking a look at the data that is there, as we covered in the earlier stages of this presentation. And then we can dive into a few different use cases as well. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to switch over to the AcreValue website. And so what we'll see here is a map of the AcreValue site. And as you zoom into the AcreValue map, what we'll start to see is parcel boundaries near the surface, right? And so as I move my cursor around, you can see those parcel boundaries appear. This is going to be one of your first places to interact with the data that is on AcreValue. So let's start with clicking on a parcel and take a look at the data that is there. And then I'll explain how this can be useful, right? So let's click on this parcel and we'll see the data that is here in the sidebar. Starting with, as soon as you click a parcel, you get information about that parcel, including who is the owner, how do I get in touch with them? If I want to try and find phone numbers and email addresses, you can search for those here as well. We'll also tell you summary information about the parcel itself. So things like how many acres is it? Tell me about the soil quality, what crops were grown here recently. You know, was it corn? Was it tillable ground? Or was it potentially grass and pasture land? Tell me about the slope and the flood risk. And the nice thing here about AcreValue is because we are fundamentally map-based, again, it means that we are able to provide maps to you for these properties, not just summary records. And so as I select Get Full Report, what we'll see here is we'll see a report pop up of information that is underneath this particular parcel here. We'll start to see, here is my subject property that I just selected. And then, like I mentioned, we have the all new elevation maps that are on AcreValue, which is phenomenal. We'll also be able to see things like soil survey, flood hazard, crop history, and more for a property. So all of this information, as I click through the first property report, you get all of this information basically at your fingertips. I mean, it really only took 1 or 2 clicks to get into all of this information that's provided back to you. And now let's relate this back to certain use cases, right? So I think the first goal, if we think about focusing on one, is one that's applicable to most folks, right? Which is I want to understand this property, but I want to understand it in the context of what is this property worth in today's market? How can I quantify that, right? All of this information is going to be helpful in providing you with characteristics about the land. This all goes into quantifying how much could this property be worth. Now, one thing that's also going to be important in terms of the property reports here and what AcreValue provides is what we covered earlier. Sales comparables. Where is that data? How can I get there? And the nice thing is that as soon as you generate a property report, we're looking at a property report here, we will also be able to provide you with comparable sales for the property that you just selected. Again, going back to the presentation, what this represents is sale records of recent properties from the nearby area. And these will help you determine what the potential land values for the property I'm interested in. And that essentially means let's take a look at when these properties sold, right? These are from recently as a couple months ago. And let's take a look at how much they sold for. And using that primary information, as well as some of the other maps and other information about the sales, we can start to estimate what a value is going to be for this particular property. What you saw me do was you saw me get from, I have a subject in mind. Now let's get all the way to, I have maps for my property. I have a potential land value to present back to the landowner if I'm looking to purchase, or potentially if I'm a seller, this is the land value that I should shoot for in negotiations. This research is phenomenal and it'll be saved to your account. I also want to mention that you can print this report as well. And so for our professional audience out there, printing the report has been a very big deal to make sure that you can not only get the research done, but also present it to your clients in a way that's easy to understand and is helpful as well. So let's talk about that. Up in the top right-hand corner, you have the ability to hit download, configure your report, and then download or print or share it in a PDF format. And so let's take a look at that report here. I've got it queued up. We can quickly zoom through this report and take a look at some of the information that is here. Again, this PDF version is representing all of the same information that you just saw on my digital report, right? That means I have the same comparable sales here. I've got the same maps underneath them. This is more so about how can I take the research from AcreValue and present it back to the people who need to be able to see this. So let's continue to scroll through here. I've got the elevation maps. Like I mentioned, we had just uploaded those earlier this week, so very excited to present that to folks. We've got soil maps here as well. Flood hazard, this is going to be very important for understanding where you can do certain things like potentially develop energy infrastructure or really, I mean, what is going to be tillable land for you as well. And then we'll be able to tell you crop histories as well. In addition to current ownership, aerial information, this report is pretty chock full of information that's going to be helpful for your property here. So let's pause again. We just covered from start to finish the ability to estimate a property's land value, print out that relevant land characteristics map as well. You know, we have this in the printable version. Now let's talk about the process of maybe how to find owners nearby, as well as how to search for properties that fit my search criteria, right? Let's say I'm in the market, I want to try and purchase some land. How do I go about finding those properties, and how do I go about potentially contacting landowners as well, right? And this will be relevant for the folks who are not only thinking of buying, but also thinking of renting new land as well. So let's go through that. I'm going to flip over to the land sales tab here, and let's take a look at the properties that are nearby. So I'm zoomed into, in this case, it's McLean County, Illinois. I've got a property map up. There are lots of parcels in the area. And as I move my mouse around, you can actually see that I have all of the owners that are here. But this is all of the parcels, right? So let's think about if I have a very specific criteria for the parcels that I want to go find, how do I do that? And so one of the things that's on AcreValue here is the ability to say, for the data and information that's on the map currently, I want to be able to filter that out given certain characteristics so that only certain parcels come back. And so what you'll see me do here in a moment is to say, I can use some of the filters above the map, as well as there's a section for more filters here to be able to say, let's only find properties that fit certain criteria. So again, I have Illinois, McLean County saved here. I've got options to enter in a parcel number or owner name if I want to search for parcels that way. But in the case of, I'm in the market to potentially buy, I don't really know who the owner is just yet. I'm more so looking at properties that fit certain characteristics like acreage. If I have a designated acreage for properties that I want to go find, we can drop that in here. Let's say, something between 40 to 60 acres. And if I'm a grower, maybe I'm looking for tillable land, right? So that means being able to do things like I'm going to select land use. It's got to be cropland properties. Let's say, for example, maybe we can also put in soil productivity. So PI values, we're in Illinois, so that would be relevant. Let's set a minimum for that. And once I set my filters, we can apply them and the system will come back and say, out of all of the parcels that are in the system, here are the ones that fit your criteria. These are going to be the people to get in touch with, right? Instead of looking at all the parcels in the system, these are the ones that fit your specific criteria in terms of what's relevant for your search. And it looks like there's 12 of them on the map here out of a potential 1,000, over 1,000 parcels in this county that fit these criteria. And as I see them on the map, I can do things like click into each of them where I can see the owner, I can see their address. I can also try and find phone numbers and email addresses for them. And I can also open up a list as well, which will allow me to view all of the parcels and their information kind of seamlessly. So you'll see me do that in a moment. And I can understand, for these properties that are on my map here are all of the owners. Here's how I get in touch with them in terms of the public tax address. If I want to try and find phone numbers and emails, I can do that through here as well. Finally, I will note there are some professional and enterprise level folks that are on the system here. I will note one of the most recent search criteria that has been relevant to people is being able to say, well, does my property have any sort of energy infrastructure, things like transmission lines, substations? And this is going back to the conversation that I had referenced earlier around best use case and knowing how to get the best out of your land. So I will quickly flip over to another tab here that shows an example of cropland in McLean County that is nearby to a transmission line. So specifically, I have my filter set up so that only properties that are within a mile from the transmission line show up. And it's actually a very cool visual here. We can see that out of the county, there are several different transmission lines that, in the eastern half of the county, they run east-west here. There's also a few that run towards the northeast of the county. And for those parcels that are nearby to the transmission line between 40 and 60 acres and are mostly cropland, here are the ones that you need to reach out to. The same way that you saw me do earlier, you can open up a list for all of these parcels. That's going to get you to, how do I get in touch with these people as fast as I can? How do I understand information about the property? And fundamentally, how do I then get in touch with them to put an offer in or to have a conversation about their land? Now, there are many, many use cases on AcreValue, like I mentioned earlier. We only have time for a couple of them here. We've covered a few of the main use cases, primarily finding land values on AcreValue, as well as figuring out who are the owners of a property and how do I get in touch with them. There are many other use cases, so let's make sure to explain how to get started on AcreValue. And if you have a specific goal or a use case in mind that you want to achieve, let us know in the Q&A section or send me an email and I'd be happy to walk you through it as well.